Good evening, everybody. I'm 68 years old, and I want to clear something up right away. I'm not old. I'm just tired of everything. There's a difference. Old people have wisdom. I'm not sure I have wisdom. I have experience. And most of that experience is learning what not to do again. At 25, I thought I knew everything. At 40, I realized I knew nothing. At 55, I thought I was getting wiser. At 68, I just want everybody to leave me alone for 20 minutes. That's my retirement plan. 20 minutes. No phone, no wife, no children, no emails. No one saying, "Can you help me with something?" Because I've learned something about that sentence. When somebody says, "Can you help me with something?" they are lying. It's never something. It's a project. My day starts early now. Not because I'm disciplined, because my body has become an alarm clock. I wake up at 5:47 every morning. I don't set an alarm. My bladder has a better scheduling system than my phone. I wake up. I look at the clock. 5:47. I think, that's ridiculous. I go back to sleep. 10 minutes later. 5:57. My bladder says, "Good morning." I say, "Go back to sleep." It says, "We both know how this ends." So I get up. And that's when the first negotiation of the day begins. Getting out of bed. I sit on the edge of the mattress. I don't stand up immediately. I prepare. I stretch my legs. I move my ankles. I take a deep breath. I look around. I'm basically checking for witnesses. Then I stand. And sometimes something cracks. I don't know what it is. At this age, when something makes a noise, you don't investigate. You just wait. If the pain arrives, then you know. The bathroom is dangerous when you're 68. The floor is slippery. The toilet is low. The shower is wet. And everything has corners. I used to think my biggest danger in life would be driving. No, it's the bathroom. You can survive a highway accident. Then one morning you slip getting out of the shower because your foot moved 3 inches. And you're lying there thinking, this is how it ends? My wife comes running. She says, "What happened?" I say, "I slipped." She says, "Are you hurt?" I say, "My dignity." She says, "That's been gone for years." That's why we've been married 39 years. She knows exactly where to aim. Coffee is very important to me. At my age, coffee isn't a beverage, it's a medical intervention. I don't drink coffee because I enjoy it. I drink coffee because I need to become a person. Before coffee, if you ask me, "How are you?" I'm not legally responsible for my answer. My wife knows. She doesn't talk to me before coffee. That's how you know a marriage is healthy. There are boundaries. She once walked into the kitchen at 6:15 in the morning and said, "Good morning." I looked at her. She looked at me. She said, "Sorry." Then she backed out. That's love. Breakfast used to be easy. Eggs, bacon, toast. Now my doctor has opinions. My doctor says, "Watch your cholesterol." My wife says, "Watch your cholesterol." My children say, "Dad, you need to eat healthier." Everybody has become my nutritionist. Nobody asked. I eat 1 piece of bacon. My daughter sees it. She says, "Dad?" I say, "What?" "Bacon?" I say, "Yes." She says, "You know that's bad for you." I say, "So is being around you before coffee." She doesn't appreciate honesty. My doctor and I have a strange relationship. He asks, "How are you feeling?" I say, "Fine." He says, "Any pain?" I say, "No." He says, "Any dizziness?" No. Any shortness of breath? No. Any fatigue? I say, "It's 7:30 in the morning." He says, "Yes." I say, "I'm 68. Of course I'm tired." He laughs. I don't. I paid for this appointment. I'm going to get my money's worth. Doctors ask questions like they expect you to remember everything. When did the pain start? I don't know. Was it Tuesday? Maybe. Morning or evening? What are you, the police? I don't keep a diary of my injuries. I just wake up and think, oh, there's a new one. The doctor asks, on a scale from 1 to 10, how bad is the pain? I hate that question because I don't know what a 10 is. I haven't been shot. I haven't been hit by a truck. So maybe this is a 3. Or maybe this is a 9 and I don't know it. I said, about a 6. He said, what does 6 feel like? I said, like a 5, but more expensive. The pharmacy is where you really realize you're getting older. You walk in and the pharmacist knows you. Not your name, your medication. She looks at you and says, refill? I say, yeah. She says, which one? I say, the little blue one. She says, which little blue one? I say, the one that keeps me alive. She says, you have 7. 7? I'm not taking medication anymore. I'm collecting Pokemon. My wife sends me to the grocery store. She says, just get a few things. That's another dangerous sentence. Just get milk, eggs, bread, and coffee. Easy, I can handle 4 things. I get to the store. I look at my list. Milk, eggs, bread, coffee. Perfect. Then I see something on sale. I think, she likes that. I put it in the cart. Then I see something else. I put that in too. Now I've forgotten why I'm there. I walk around the store like a tourist. I call my wife. She says, what? I say, I'm at the store. She says, I know. I say, what did you want? She says, I told you. I say, yeah, but I'm looking at the bread now. She says, get the bread. I say, which one? Silence. Then she says, the one we always buy. I say, we buy 7 kinds. She says, then use your judgment. Never say that to me. You don't want my judgment. You want bread. I hate self-checkout. I didn't come to the store to become an unpaid employee. I scan the item. The machine says, unexpected item in bagging area. I say, yeah. It's a banana. The machine says, please wait for assistance. Why? The banana is right there. I can see it. You can see it. Everybody can see it. Then an employee walks over. She looks at the banana, looks at me, touches the screen. Problem solved. I say, thank you. She says, no problem. That's the most humiliating part. A 22-year-old just fixed a banana. My wife is very careful with money. I'm careful too. We're just careful in different directions. She says, we need to save money. I say, absolutely. Then I buy a $40 tool because I might need it someday. She says, why did you buy that? I say, because it was on sale. She says, it was $40. I say, it used to be $60. She says, so you saved $20? I say, exactly. She says, how much did you spend? I say, $40. She says, so you lost $40. I say, that's not how shopping works. She says, that's exactly how shopping works. I married a mathematician. My garage is full of things I haven't used in 15 years. My wife wants to throw everything away. I say, no. She says, you haven't used that since 2011. I say, exactly. She says, what does it do? I say, I don't remember. She says, then throw it away. I say, that's when I'll need it. She says, when? I say, the day after we throw it away. That's a law of nature. You throw something away and immediately need it. I once threw away a screwdriver. The next morning, I needed a screwdriver. I looked at my wife. She said, don't. I said, I wasn't going to say anything. She said, "You were going to blame me." I said, "I was going to blame the universe." She said, "Blame the universe quietly." My kids are adults, but they still call me when something goes wrong. My son called me, "Dad, my car won't start." I said, "What happened?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Did you turn the key?" He said, "Yes." I said, "What happened?" He said, "Nothing." I said, "Do you have gas?" Silence. He said, "I think so." I said, "Look at the fuel gauge." Another silence. He said, "It's on empty." I said, "That's not a mechanical problem." He said, "I thought it meant empty for today." That's my son. He has a college degree. My children are also my technology support team. Every time my phone does something strange, I call them. They say, "Dad, just restart it." That's their solution to everything. Phone broken? Restart it. Computer broken? Restart it. Television broken? Restart it. Marriage? I'm thinking about it. One time I called my son because my computer wasn't working. He said, "Did you restart it?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Did you unplug it?" "Yes." "Plug it back in?" "Yes." "Did you check the Wi-Fi?" "Yes." He said, "Okay, Dad, what exactly is wrong?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "It made a noise." He said, "What kind of noise?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Can you describe it?" I said, "It sounded expensive." He hung up. I hate passwords. Every website wants a password, and every password has rules. 8 characters. 1 uppercase letter. 1 number. 1 symbol. No spaces. Cannot be a previous password. Cannot contain your name. Cannot contain your birthday. Cannot contain your dog's name. At this point, the website doesn't want a password. It wants a secret identity. Then it says, "Create a password you will remember." I can't even remember why I walked into the kitchen. You want me to remember Q times 7 exclamation point M R 9 2 $ K L question mark. Absolutely. I'll write it down. Then the website says, "Never write down your password." Fine. I'll forget it. Then, forgot password? Yes! Finally! Something I'm qualified for. My phone knows more about me than my wife. I search for a new pair of shoes. 5 minutes later, every website is showing me shoes. I search for a lawnmower. Suddenly, my entire internet experience is lawnmowers. I searched once. Why does my knee hurt? Now my phone thinks I'm dying. Every advertisement. Walkers, compression socks, medical insurance, funeral plans. I searched one medical question. The internet basically said, "Would you like a casket with that?" I don't understand social media. People post everything. What they ate, where they went, who they're with, what they're thinking. I don't even tell my wife what I'm thinking. And we've been married 39 years. A stranger doesn't need to know. My wife once asked, "What are you thinking?" I said, "Nothing." She said, "You're thinking something." I said, "No." She said, "I can tell." I said, "Then why did you ask?" That's advanced marriage. I've lived in the same neighborhood for years. Neighbors are strange. When you're young, neighbors say, "Hi." When you're older, neighbors give you information. I was outside one morning. My neighbor walked over. He said, "You hear about the house on the corner?" I said, "No." He said, "They're getting divorced." I said, "How do you know?" He said, "I saw a moving truck." I said, "That's your evidence?" He said, "2 trucks." I said, "Oh, that's basically detective work in a retirement community." My neighbor installed a security camera. Now he knows everything. He called me one morning. "You were outside at 6:12 yesterday." I said, "How do you know?" He said, "My camera." I said, "Why are you watching me?" He said, "I'm not." I said, "Then how do you know I was outside at 6:12? He said, "The camera records everything." I said, "That's still watching me." He said, "No, it's security." I said, "What's the difference?" He said, "Security has better equipment." Retirement is not what I expected. I thought retirement meant freedom. It means you're available. Everybody assumes you have time. My son, "Dad, can you help me move?" My daughter, "Dad, can you watch the kids?" My wife, "Can you paint the bedroom?" The neighbor, "Can you give me a ride?" Nobody asks, "Are you busy?" Because you're retired. Apparently, retirement means you're unemployed, therefore public property. I love my grandchildren. They're wonderful. They're also expensive. I asked my grandson, "What do you want for your birthday?" He said, "A new phone." I said, "How much?" He said, $900. I said, "That's not a phone." He said, "Yes, it is." I said, "When I was your age, my entire bicycle cost $40. He said, "What happened to it?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Then why are you telling me?" Kids have no respect for history. My family has a group chat. I hate it. There are 14 people in it. Someone sends, "Good morning." Then somebody sends a flower. Then a coffee cup. Then a picture of a sunrise. Then somebody sends, "Have a blessed day." Then someone sends a joke. Then someone asks, "Who is bringing dessert?" Then my daughter sends a picture of the baby. Then my son sends a picture of his dog. And somewhere in the middle someone writes, "Dad, can you bring a ladder?" I don't even see it. 3 hours later, "Dad?" "What? Did you see my message?" "No." "It's in the family chat." "Which message?" "The one about the ladder." I say, "Why would I be reading a family chat looking for ladder requests?" She says, "Because it's important." The entire family is sharing pictures of babies and sunsets, and somehow I'm the hardware department. Getting dressed has changed. I used to dress to look good. Now I dress based on comfort. I don't care what the shirt looks like. Can I breathe? Can I sit? Can I bend over? If yes, fashion. My wife says, "You can't wear that." I say, "Why?" She says, "It doesn't match." I say, "I'm going to the hardware store." She says, "So?" I say, "The screws don't care." Going out to dinner used to be exciting. Now the most important thing is the chair. We walk into a restaurant. My wife says, "Do you like this place?" I say, "Do they have comfortable chairs?" She says, "I don't know." I say, "Then we're not staying." I don't care if the food is amazing. If I have to eat it sitting on a wooden box, I'll order takeout. At 68, comfort is the appetizer. My wife likes to go to bed early. She says, "I'm tired." I say, "Me too." We get into bed. She says, "Good night." I say, "Good night." 10 minutes later, "Are you asleep?" I say, "No." She says, "Why?" I say, "You asked me a question." She says, "Go to sleep." I say, "Okay." 10 minutes later, "Are you asleep?" Now I'm angry. I say, "Yes." She says, "Really?" I say, "Yes." She says, "You answered." I say, "Exactly." That's why I've been married 39 years. I have learned the most important skill in marriage, knowing when to stop talking. People ask me, what's the hardest part about getting older? It's not the gray hair. It's not the wrinkles. It's not even the aches and pains. It's realizing how fast everything goes. One day you're raising your kids. Then they're grown. One day you're working every morning. Then suddenly you're retired. One day your parents are giving you advice. Then you're the one giving advice. And somewhere in the middle, you become the guy who complains about the price of eggs. Nobody prepares you for that. You wake up one morning and think, when did I become this guy? Then you look at the grocery receipt and you say, who charged me $6.49 for eggs? And suddenly you understand your father. I've learned that you don't need a perfect life. You need people you love, a little money, good health, a comfortable chair, a working coffee maker, and a wife who knows when you're lying, but loves you anyway. I've learned to appreciate simple things, a quiet morning, a good meal, a phone call from your kids, your grandchildren laughing, a friend checking in, and getting through an entire day without hearing, Dad, can you help me? That's a beautiful day. But you know what? I'm not really afraid of getting older. I've already done most of the things I was afraid of. I've raised children. I've worked. I've made mistakes. I've fallen in love. I've stayed married. I've survived bad decisions. I've survived my own cooking. I've survived my wife's cooking. And I've survived 39 years of hearing, I told you so. That's the real test of character. My wife says, you know, you don't have to be right all the time. I said, I know. She said, really? I said, yes. She said, then why do you keep arguing? I said, because I'm not always right. Pause. But I'm frequently entertaining. She laughed. Then she said, go take the trash out. I said, see? She said, what? I said, this is exactly what I'm talking about. She said, you're retired. I said, exactly. She said, then you have time. I said, that's not retirement. She said, what is it? I said, it's unpaid employment with better snacks. So that's my life. I'm 68. I'm married. I'm retired. My children still need money. My grandchildren need expensive electronics. My doctor wants me to exercise. My phone thinks I'm dying. My wife thinks I'm wrong. My neighbor is watching me on camera. And my refrigerator has started sending me notifications. Apparently my milk is about to expire. You know what? So am I. But I'm not worried, because I've discovered the secret to a long life. Don't exercise too much. Don't eat too healthy. Don't stress about everything. Laugh every day. Love your family. Call your friends. And if somebody tells you, enjoy every moment, don't. Some moments are terrible. Enjoy the good ones. Survive the bad ones. And turn the embarrassing ones into comedy. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to make it to tomorrow without breaking anything. And if you're over 60, that includes your hip. Thank you, everybody. You've been fantastic. I'm going home now. If my wife asks where I am, tell her I'm at the hardware store. Because apparently, retirement is just another word for you're available. Good night.